Imagine a mind so brilliant, so precocious, that by age 5, it was already composing music.
Yeah, it's almost unbelievable.
A genius who then, despite a short 35-year life, created over 800 works. I mean, across virtually every Western classical genre.
Symphonies, operas, concertos.
Everything. Things that still thunder through concert halls, operas that remain, the absolute pinnacle. How is that level of output, that sheer talent, even possible?
It's staggering, really.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take a stack of articles, research notes, and basically give you the ultimate shortcut to being truly well-informed.
And today we're diving deep into Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
An extraordinary life, an unparalleled legacy. We've sifted through, a lot of sources, including a detailed Wikipedia entry, to pull out the most potent nuggets for you.
Right. The key stuff.
Our mission is to guide you through the triumphs, yes, but also the profound struggles that shaped Mozart's genius. We want to deliver those aha moments without, drowning you in detail.
So by the end of this, you'll walk away with a richer understanding, maybe a newfound appreciation for the man behind the music.
Exactly. Some of the world's most beautiful and enduring music. Okay, let's unpack this. Born January 27, 1756, in Salzburg. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Youngest of 7 children, though 5 sadly died in infancy. That was quite common back then.
His father, Leopold Mozart, was a composer himself, a minor one perhaps.
And an experienced teacher. He even published a successful violin textbook.
Right. But it was his children, especially Wolfgang, who would, define his legacy, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating, I think, is just how early this prodigious ability showed up.
You mean the composing at age 5?
Even before that. His elder sister, Nannerl, started keyboard lessons, and 3-year-old Wolfgang would just watch.
Just watching.
Yeah. Nannerl later remembered him picking out thirds, delighted by the sounds, just exploring. By age 4, Leopold started teaching him minuets.
And then by 5...
He's composing. Little pieces his father diligently wrote down. We actually have them K1 through 5. That K refers to the Köchel catalog.
Which organizes all his work, right?
Exactly. It shows this incredible innate drive. So much, though, that Leopold pretty much gave up his own composing to focus entirely on Wolfgang.
It really is astounding. And that drive, it didn't stay local for long.
No, Leopold was ambitious.
He took Wolfgang and Nannerl on these extensive European tours, starting in 1762.
Hitting major cities, Munich, Vienna, Prague, Paris, London.
And meeting big names like Johann Christian Bach in London.
And Wolfgang wrote his first symphony then, at age 8.
8 years old. It's incredible.
It is. But it also makes you pause and think, what was the human cost of all this?
The travel conditions.
Primitive, really. And the family endured these long, sometimes near-fatal illnesses far from home. Leopold got sick, the children got sick.
These weren't easy trips.
Not at all. Physically tough, financially draining sometimes, but absolutely crucial for Wolfgang's development.
That exposure to different musical styles across Europe.
It profoundly shaped his unique compositional language. Sacrifices were definitely made for that genius.
And the journeys continued. 3 trips to Italy. The first one, 1769 to 71, seems particularly important.
Very. He met key figures like Myslivchek and Giovanni Battista Martini. Got accepted into the famous Accademia Filarmonica in Bologna.
Right. And there's that story about the Miserere.
Ah, yes, the Allegri Miserere myth. It's a captivating one.
Hearing it twice in the Sistine Chapel and writing it out from memory. Basically stealing Vatican intellectual property.
Exactly. It sounds amazing, speaks volumes about his ear, but scholars widely dispute its plausibility. Still, it shows the legend he was becoming,
Legend or not, his talent was real. His opera Mitridate, Re di Ponto in Milan was a huge success.
It led to more commissions, definitely.
But Leopold's dream of a job for Wolfgang in Italy.
It didn't happen. Empress Maria Theresa was apparently reluctant to employ what she called useless people, a rather blunt assessment.
Ouch. So back to Salzburg then. Returning from Italy in 1773, Mozart gets employed as a court musician in Salzburg.
Under Prince Archbishop Hieronymus Colloredo.
And he had friends, admirers there. He got to compose quite a bit, didn't he? Symphonies, sonatas.
And that brilliant series of 5 violin concertos in 1775. Staples today.
But if we step back, it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it?
Not really. Despite the artistic output, he grew deeply discontented.
Why?
Well, the salary was low, really low, only 150 florins a year.
Which wasn't much even then.
Barely enough to live on, especially if he had ambitions. And his real passion was opera, which Salzburg rarely offered.
And the court theater closed in 1775.
Making things even worse, he was just yearning for more freedom, bigger opportunities.
So he tried to find work elsewhere.
Repeatedly. Visits to Vienna, Munich. Mostly unsuccessful in landing a permanent post, though his opera, La Finta Giardiniera, did well in Munich.
And then in 1777, he actually resigned from Salzburg.
Yep, and ventured out again, this time with his mother. Augsburg, Mannheim, Paris, Munich.
Mannheim was important, right? The orchestra.
Considered the best in Europe.
Sure.
We can gather them there, yes. And he also fell in love with Aloysia Weber.
But still no job.
Still no job. And the trip ended tragically in Paris in 1778.
His mother died.
Fell ill and died. Possibly exacerbated by a lack of funds to get a doctor quickly. Just a terrible time marked by financial strain and this deep personal loss.
It sounds absolutely devastating.
It must have been.
And this forced him back to Salzburg in 1779, reluctantly taking up a new post, court organist and concertmaster.
For 450 florins this time. Yeah. A bit better, but...
The discontent was still simmering.
Deep down, yes.
Okay, so now we get to a really pivotal moment. 1781. His opera, Idomeneo, premieres successfully in Munich.
A real triumph.
But then Archbishop Colloredo summons him to Vienna, and the treatment there
It was apparently appalling. Treated like a servant, dining with valets and cooks?
Not exactly how you'd expect a celebrated composer to be treated.
No. And this period, it just highlights Mozart's burning desire for independence. He wrote to his father, determined for the emperor to get to know me. His ambition was palpable.
But Colloredo didn't want him performing elsewhere.
He wanted to keep him tied to his own establishment, which just fueled Mozart's anger.
Now, you mentioned earlier the system of patronage. Was Colloredo just acting normally for the time?
That's a fair question. Patronage often did treat musicians more like skilled staff than independent artists. Mozart's desire for freedom was quite radical.
So it wasn't just Colloredo being uniquely difficult?
Probably a mix. Colloredo was certainly authoritarian, but Mozart's genius combined with his refusal to be subservient created this perfect storm.
Leading to the climax.
He tries to resign. Colloredo refuses initially.
And then the infamous dismissal.
Literally, according to the accounts, dismissed with a kick in the arse by the Archbishop's steward, Count Arco.
Wow. Wow. That's quite an exit. Infuriating for him, I imagine.
Absolutely. And even his own father, Leopold, urged him to reconcile, siding against him.
But this moment, this break...
It was revolutionary. It fundamentally changed his life. As scholars point out, it freed him.
Free to pursue an independent career in Vienna.
Free from his employer, and maybe even free from his father's constant demands. He chose freedom, with all its risks.
So Mozart launches his freelance career in Vienna, and it starts well.
Starts strong, yeah. He quickly establishes himself as, quote, the finest keyboard player in Vienna.
He even had that keyboard duel with Clementi before the emperor.
That's right. And his opera, Die Entführung aus dem Serail, the abduction from the Seraglio, premiered in 1782.
And it was a hit.
A huge hit.
Yeah.
Performed all over German-speaking Europe. Really cemented his reputation.
And things were happening personally, too.
Yes. His focus shifted to Constanze Weber, Aloysia's sister.
Ah, the sister of the woman he fell for earlier.
Exactly. And they got married in St. Stephen's Cathedral in August 1782.
Was it straightforward?
Not entirely. There was a bit of a crisis. She was living with him. His father disapproved initially.
But they did it anyway.
They did. They literally got married the day before Leopold's letter giving consent finally arrived. A real statement of personal independence.
They certainly committed. They went on to have 6 children, though sadly only 2 survived infancy.
Carl Thomas and Franz Xaver Wolfgang. Yes, a reminder of the harsh realities back then.
Musically, he kept evolving, right? Even after achieving success.
Absolutely. Through his friendship with Baron von Swieten, he got deeply into the works of Baroque masters. Bach, Handel.
And that influenced his own music.
Profoundly. You hear it in things like the fugal writing and the magic flute, or the incredible finale of the Jupiter Symphony. He was always learning, incorporating.
And he befriended Haydn around this time, 1784.
Yes, Joseph Haydn. Imagine those two playing string quartets together, which they apparently did.
2 giants of music. What did Haydn think of Mozart?
Haydn's praise was, well, extraordinary. He told Leopold Mozart in 1785, I tell you before God, and as an honest man, your son is the greatest composer known to me. He has taste, and what is more, the greatest skill in composition. Coming from Haydn, that's immense respect.
And Mozart was really managing his own career now, putting on concerts,
He was quite the entrepreneur between 82 and 85. Mounted his own popular subscription concerts, often premiering 3 or 4 new piano concertos each season.
In places like ballrooms?
Yeah, unconventional venues sometimes. He was making it work.
And making good money.
Substantial returns, yes.
Yeah.
Which led him in Constance's day to adopt a more luxurious lifestyle. Expensive apartment, fine for a piano, billiard table.
Sending their son to boarding school.
Right. But here's the thing. He saved very little of it.
Was he just reckless?
It's complex. Freelance income was irregular, big sums followed by lean periods, and there was pressure to maintain a certain image. It probably led to a kind of hand-to-mouth existence, even when earning well.
And around this time, 1784, he becomes a Freemason.
Yes, an important connection for the rest of his life. He composed quite a bit of Masonic music.
And then came that amazing collaboration with Lorenzo da Ponte.
Starting around 1785, yes. After focusing so much on piano concertos.
Giving us the Marriage of Figaro.
In 86. Then Don Giovanni in 87, and Così fan tutte in 90. Absolute cornerstones of opera.
Even if they were maybe challenging for audiences back then.
Their complexity definitely pushed boundaries for listeners and performers alike.
But despite these artistic peaks, things took a downturn financially towards the end of the decade.
They did. Around 1786, his income started to shrink significantly. By 1788, it had dropped by maybe 66%.
Why was that?
Partly the Austro-Turkish War. It affected the general economy, aristocratic patronage dried up a bit.
So he had to adjust his lifestyle.
Well, he moved to a cheaper suburb, but reports suggest he actually increased his living space, maybe didn't cut back as much as needed. He ended up borrowing money frequently.
From friends?
Like his fellow Mason, Michael von Puchberg. Letters pleading for loans survive.
That must have been difficult.
And he undertook these long journeys, Leipzig, Dresden, Berlin, Frankfurt, hoping to improve things, but often unsuccessfully. Some suggest he might have been suffering from depression during this period. A really tough chapter.
Which brings us to his final year, 1791. And this is where it gets, well, almost tragically poignant.
It was an incredible period, a time of astonishing productivity and maybe even personal recovery, right up until the end.
He composed some of his most famous works then.
Some of his most beloved, absolutely. The Magic Flute, which was a huge public success.
The Clarinet Concerto.
The beautiful motet of Verum Corpus, and of course the unfinished Requiem.
And financially, things were looking up too.
It seemed so. Wealthy patrons in Hungary and Amsterdam were pledging annuities. He was starting to pay off his debts.
It feels like such a cruel twist of fate, just as things were maybe turning around.
His health failed.
He fell ill in Prague in September 91 during the premiere of La Clemenza di Pito.
His health went downhill fast after returning to Vienna. By November 20th, he was bedridden. Swelling, pain, vomiting.
And he died on December 5, 1791, just 35 years old.
With the Requiem still largely unfinished on his desk.
The circumstances of his death. Still debated, right? Lots of myths.
So many myths. The official record just says severe miliary fever, which was a pretty vague diagnosis then. It basically meant a fever with a rash.
Not very specific.
No.
Yeah.
Researchers have suggested over 100 possible causes since then. Acute rheumatic fever, strep infection, kidney disease, even poisoning, though that's largely discounted now. We just don't know for sure.
And his funeral, often portrayed as a pauper's burial?
Which isn't quite accurate. He was buried in a common grave at St. Mark's Cemetery. That was standard practice for non-aristocrats in Vienna.
Meaning the grave wasn't permanent.
Right, it was subject to excavation after about 10 years. But it wasn't a sign of poverty, just the custom. Few mourners attended, but that was also typical Viennese burial practice then.
It's good to clear up those myths. What about Mozart the man? His appearance, character?
Descriptions paint a picture of a remarkably small man, very thin and pale.
Not imposing physically.
No. Profusion of fine, fair hair. His face was pitted from smallpox he'd had as a child. Soft, tenor voice, apparently, but could get quite loud when excited.
And he liked dressing well.
Loved elegant clothing. Often wore a white wig like in most portraits. He wasn't the romantic, brooding type physically, maybe.
And his work habits.
Worked long, hard hours, often sketching ideas constantly, though Constance apparently destroyed many drafts after his death, sadly.
He had hobbies, too.
Enjoyed billiards, dancing, kept pets, a canary, a starling he was quite fond of, a dog, even a horse for riding.
And that famous quirkiness, the scatological humor.
Ah, yes. He had a startling fondness for it. It shows up in his letters, even in some musical canons he wrote for fun. Shows a very different, maybe more playful or earthy side to him.
Musically, how do we sum him up? The classical archetype.
He really is. admired for that melodic beauty, formal elegance, richness of harmony and texture, but it's not just delicate. Charles Rosen, the scholar, points out the violence and sensuality in some masterpieces. Think of the C minor piano concerto or the G minor symphony. There's real depth and drama.
And he composed in every genre.
Every major genre, incredibly versatile. He practically invented the classical piano concerto as we know it.
Those travels really paid off.
Forging that unique style, absorbing everything from J.C. Bach to Italian opera buffa. And he kept pushing, incorporating Baroque counterpoint, exploring really advanced chromatic harmony, like in the Dissonance Quartet.
So his legacy, his influence, it's just immense, isn't it?
Immeasurable, really.
Yeah.
His most famous student was Hummel, but the impact goes so far beyond direct teaching.
How did he shape what came next?
Well, think about Beethoven, 15 years younger, deeply influenced. He played Mozart's operas, wanted to study with him.
And later composers.
So many paid homage. Chopin, Tchaikovsky writing variations on his themes. It just continued generation after generation.
Even Einstein had that quote.
Right. That Mozart's music is so pure, it seems to have been ever present in the universe. High praise from a different kind of genius.
And all his works cataloged with those K numbers.
The Köchel catalog, a testament to the sheer volume and importance of his output, forever etched into our culture.
What an incredible story we've traced. From this dazzling child prodigy
to a fiercely independent artist, struggling but reaching immense fame.
Leaving this indelible mark on music, all in just 35 short years. It's a story of talent, ambition, struggle, genius.
An undeniable, lasting impact.
So considering that relentless drive, the constant innovation, the sheer volume of masterpieces, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does Mozart's life tell us about the true cost, maybe, of genius?
And what more could he have given us?
Exactly. How much more might he have brought into the world if he'd just lived another decade? Or two. It's mind-boggling to think about.
It really is.
We really encourage you, take a moment after this. Go listen to one of the pieces we mentioned, maybe the power of the Jupiter Symphony or the enchantment of the magic flute.
Listen with maybe a newfound appreciation for the incredible man behind those notes. Have you ever looked at your grocery bill and just thought, wait a second, my money just doesn't stretch as far as it used to?
Yeah.
That feeling, right? That sense that everything costs more than it did last year, maybe even last month. It's driven by a term we hear constantly, inflation.
It's everywhere. News headlines, family chats.
Exactly. But what does it really mean? For your wallet, for the economy?
Yeah, what's actually going on?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your sources, and today we've got a really comprehensive look at inflation, and we pull out the most important nuggets.
We try to make sense of it all.
Our mission today is to demystify inflation. We're going on a deep dive looking at its, well, surprisingly ancient history all the way through to modern debates.
Exploring the effects, how it's measured, how it's controlled. It's a big topic.
It really is. At its absolute core, inflation is about the average price of goods and services going up, usually measured with something like the Consumer Price Index, the CPI.
Right. And when that general price level rises, each dollar, each pound, each euro, it just buys fewer goods and services.
Simple as that. Inflation means your money loses purchasing power.
That's the bottom line.
Okay, so let's unpack this. It's not just like one item getting more expensive.
Yeah.
Maybe everyone suddenly loves cucumbers, so cucumbers cost more. That's different.
Yeah, that's just a shift in tastes or maybe supply and demand for one specific thing. Inflation is broader.
It's about a general trend of prices,
Yeah.
right? Of course, a whole range of stuff. And more importantly, it's about the very value of money itself.
Exactly. It's fundamental.
The word inflation actually comes from the Latin inflare, means to blow into or inflate.
Huh. Makes sense.
And historically, thinking back to like the 19th century after the American Civil War, the term wasn't just about prices rising.
Oh, what else?
It originally referred more directly to currency depreciation because you had this increased supply of, say, private banknotes, but not enough gold or silver backing them up.
Ah, so the money itself was seen as being inflated relative to its backing.
Precisely. And early economists, people like David Hume, David Ricardo, they were already noticing that connection. Yeah, money supply and prices.
That's fascinating. And once we get that core idea, it's about the overall purchasing power. We can see it's part of a bigger picture, right?
Right.
A whole family of terms.
That family tree, yeah. What else is on there?
Well, you've got the exact opposite. Deflation. That's a fall in the general price level, which sounds good, but can actually be really damaging.
Okay. And then there's one that sounds similar, disinflation.
Right, disinflation. Often confused with deflation, but it's different. It doesn't mean prices are falling. It means the rate of inflation is slowing down.
So prices are still going up, just not as fast, like easing off the gas pedal.
Exactly. You're still moving forward, just slower. Then, on the extreme end, you have hyperinflation.
That sounds bad.
It is. It's an out-of-control spiral. Money loses value incredibly fast. Think Weimar Germany.
Right. And wasn't there something called stagflation?
Yeah, stagflation. That's a really nasty mix. You get inflation plus slow economic growth and high unemployment, all at the same time. The 1970s were famous for it.
Okay, so good, bad, ugly. What else is in this family?
We also have reflation. That's when policymakers actually try to raise prices, usually to fight off deflation.
So they want some inflation
In
sometimes.
certain circumstances, yeah. Then there's asset price inflation. That's when things like houses or stocks get really expensive, but maybe everyday goods aren't rising as fast.
Ah, okay. Like a housing bubble kind of thing.
Sort of related, yeah. And we even have super specific terms like agflation for food and agricultural crop prices rising faster than everything else, or just house price inflation, energy inflation.
So many terms.
It helps economists pinpoint what's actually happening, you know? Distinguish between the general trend and specific sector issues.
This is where it gets really interesting for me. We're not just talking modern economics here.
Yeah.
Inflation has been around basically since money existed.
Oh, absolutely. It changes form, but the core issue persists.
One of the earliest documented cases, apparently, goes back to Alexander the Great conquering the Persian Empire. 330 BC.
Wow. So what happened? Did he flood the place with gold?
Sort of. But for centuries, the main way governments kind of caused inflation was through debasement.
Messing with the coins.
Exactly. Think about the Roman Empire. When Nero became emperor, AD 54, the main silver coin, the denarius, was over 90% silver. Pretty pure.
Okay.
Fast forward about 200 years to the 270s AD, that same denarius had hardly any silver left in it, mostly cheaper metals like copper.
So they were melting down old coins, mixing in junk metal, and making more coins out of it.
You got it. That's debasement. It let the government make a profit that's called seigniorage, the profit from making money.
Right. The difference between the face value and the cost of the metal.
Yeah, but it also flooded the market with more coins, each one worth less intrinsically. And what happens? Prices go up.
Yeah.
Rome saw rapid inflation again under Diocletian later on, tied to this.
It's a classic move. Short-term gain for the state, long-term pain for the people using the money.
And it wasn't just coins. Ancient China, the Song dynasty, they introduced paper money, fiat currency, basically.
Ahead of their time, but did it work out?
Well, the Mongol Yuan dynasty that followed, their wars were expensive, so they just printed more paper money, caused huge inflation.
Uh-oh. History repeating.
It got so bad the next dynasty, the Ming, they were initially really wary of paper money because of that experience.
Can't blame them.
And then there's the amazing story of Mansa Musa, the Malian king.
Oh, yeah, the richest man in history, supposedly.
Possibly. On his pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324, he travels with this enormous entourage. Thousands of people, nearly 100 camels just loaded with gold.
Wow.
And when he passed through Cairo, he spent and gave away so much gold that it literally depressed the price of gold there for over a decade.
He single-handedly caused gold inflation, or rather deflation of gold's value.
Exactly. Reduced its purchasing power just by being incredibly generous, or maybe just showing off. Imagine that, affecting a major city's economy for years.
These stories really drive home the point, don't they? Whenever the quantity of money, coins, paper, gold increases massively compared to the goods available.
Inflation follows.
Pretty much. Medieval Europe had quieter periods, often with deflation too. But then came the price revolution, mid-15th to mid-17th century.
What happened then?
Prices across Western Europe basically rose sixfold over 150 years, 6 times higher.
Oh, what caused that?
It's often linked to the huge amounts of gold and silver pouring in from the Americas, particularly into Spain.
Ah, the conquistadors sending treasure back.
Exactly. Though European population was also bouncing back after the Black Death, so more demand played a role too. but it was a massive long-term inflationary cycle.
So lots of new metal flooding the system, acting like the debased coins earlier, just on a bigger scale.
In effect, yes, more money chasing a similar amount of goods, relatively speaking.
Okay, so fast forward past 1700. Things were a bit up and down. Inflation, deflation.
Yeah, more intermittent periods. Until the Great Depression in the 1930s, that was a period of major deflation, falling prices, which caused huge problems.
Right. But since then, since World War II, really.
Since the Depression, the general trend globally has been for prices to rise year on year, mostly.
We definitely remember the 1970s, early 80s, double-digit inflation in many places.
Yep, that was a rough patch. But inflation did come back down by the mid-'80s, and since then we've mostly been in what economists call the Great Moderation.
The Great Moderation. Sounds nice and calm.
Relatively speaking, yes.
Eh.
A period where inflation in countries with independent central banks has been kept pretty low and stable. It helped moderate the business cycle, too. Less boom and bust.
But even with moderation, we've still seen some absolutely crazy hyperinflation blow-ups, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. Spectacular examples. The Weimar Republic in Germany after World War I is the textbook case.
Wheelbarrows full of money just to buy bread.
Pretty much. Hungary after World War II actually holds the record for the highest inflation ever recorded with paper money. Unimaginable numbers.
Wow. Any others?
Several Latin American countries have gone through periods of it. Israel in the 80s, Zimbabwe more recently, and Venezuela, just catastrophic levels.
What were the numbers for Venezuela?
As of October 2018, the annual rate was reported at something like 833,997%. Just mind-boggling.
That's not even functional money anymore.
Effectively, no. There were reports that in North Korea, people largely ditched the local currency for foreign ones because of hyperinflation. It just shows how devastating it can be. Total economic collapse.
This all brings us back to a really crucial point. What we call inflation isn't just one simple number. It's complicated.
Very complicated. And how we measure it really matters for understanding it and for how governments react.
So how do they measure this beast? The main one we hear about is the CPI, right? Consumer Price Index.
That's the most common one, yeah.
Oh.
It tries to track the price changes in a fixed basket of goods and services that a typical consumer buys.
A typical consumer. That already sounds tricky.
It is. But there are other measures, too, like the PCEPI Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index. The U.S. Federal Reserve actually prefers that one often.
Why is that?
It accounts for people substituting goods more readily, among other technical differences. Then there's the GDP deflator, which is super broad, measures prices of everything included in GDP.
Okay, and more specific ones.
Yep. You've got PPI's Producer Price Indices. They track prices from the seller's perspective, what domestic producers get for their output, useful for seeing pipeline pressures.
What about trying to see the underlying trend? I hear about core inflation.
Exactly. Core price indices, they strip out the really volatile stuff, usually food and energy prices, because those can jump around a lot due to weather or geopolitics.
So central banks look at that to see the kind of fundamental pressure.
Often, yes, for assessing longer-term trends. And different countries have their own variations. The UK uses the RPI, Retail Prices Index, which is broader than their CPI, and aims to capture more household types.
So how do they actually calculate it? Like the CPI number we hear about?
Well, in simple terms, imagine they define a shopping basket. Specific amounts of bread, milk, gas, rent, movie tickets, whatever represents typical spending.
Okay.
They calculate the total cost of that exact basket in one period, say year one. Then they calculate the cost of the identical basket in year two. The percentage increase in cost is the inflation rate.
So if the basket costs, say, $200 in year one and $208 in year two.
That's an $8 increase on a $200 base. 8, 200, 700. That's 4% inflation for that typical consumer basket.
Got it. Simple math. Complex data gathering.
Precisely.
But that leads to the big question. Why does it often feel like my personal inflation rate is higher than the official number? Is it just me?
No, it's not just you. It's a very common perception. And sometimes there might be a grain of truth to it for your specific situation.
Before we get into why it feels higher, I heard there's some, let's say, less serious ways people track prices.
Oh yeah, the fun indices. They're not official, but they're kind of insightful, or at least amusing. There's the Christmas Price Index, tracks the cost of all the gifts in the 12 days of Christmas songs.
Seriously? A partridge in a pear tree?
Yep. Then there's the famous Big Mac Index from The Economist. Compares Big Mac prices worldwide to gauge currency valuations.
Okay, I've heard of that one.
There's a Jollof Index for West Africa, a 2 dishes 1 soup index in Hong Kong, Even one for Amsterdam Canal house prices, the Herrengracht Index.
And the lipstick index, what's that?
That's the theory that lipstick sales, small, affordable luxuries, go up when the economy's bad. People treat themselves in small ways.
Fascinating. Okay, but back to the serious stuff. What makes measuring official inflation so darn difficult? What are the pitfalls?
Well, a huge one is quality versus price. This is really tough.
How so?
Okay, say a can of corn goes from 90 cents to $1. No change in the corn. That's clearly inflation for that item.
Right.
What about your smartphone? The new model costs $100 more, but it has a way better camera, faster processor, more memory. How much of that $100 increase is inflation, and how much is just paying for a better product?
Ah, I see. How do they even try to figure that out?
Statisticians use complex methods called hedonic adjustments to try and estimate the value of those quality improvements and subtract it from the price change. But it's imperfect. It's an estimate.
And the basket itself must be a headache. People's habits change.
Exactly. That's the basket issue. What's in the basket needs to represent what people actually buy and how much they spend on each item, the weights.
And that changes over time.
Constantly. They update the weights, usually annually, but sudden, drastic shifts. Like during the pandemic lockdowns, people stopped buying plane tickets and started buying, I don't know, Pelotons. That can throw the fixed basket off track temporarily.
And new products appear, old ones vanish.
Right. Evolving products.
Yeah.
How do you compare the price of a 2024 laptop to a 1994 one? They're completely different machines. Makes long-term comparisons very difficult.
Plus, not everyone buys the same stuff. Segment differences, absolutely. A retiree's spending basket is totally different from a college student's or a family with young kids. So they genuinely experience different personal inflation rates. The CPI is an average.
So my feeling might not be totally wrong for my spending?
It could be reflecting your specific basket.
Any other tricky bits? Statistical things?
Yeah, they use seasonal adjustments quite a bit. You expect heating costs to rise in winter, right? They adjust the data to smooth out those predictable seasonal bumps so you can see the underlying trend better.
Makes sense.
And then there's the potential for manipulation. It's rare in developed countries with independent statistical agencies, but there have been cases, like criticisms leveled against Argentina a decade or so ago, alleging government interference with the numbers for political reasons or to reduce debt payments tied to inflation.
Okay, so we have the official number. But you mentioned true inflation and perceived inflation. What's the difference there?
Some research suggests that the true rate of inflation, if we could perfectly account for quality changes in substitution, might actually be a bit lower than the official CPI number, maybe by up to a percentage point.
Lower. Why?
Several reasons. One is the substitution effect. If beef gets really expensive, you buy more chicken. The official fixed basket doesn't capture that switch immediately, but your actual spending might rise less.
Okay.
Then there are those unobserved quality improvements we talked about. The stats guys can't catch everything. And new goods. Your 2024 basket with smartphones and streaming services is just better than a 1994 basket, even if it costs more. The official index struggles to capture that value increase fully.
So if true inflation might be lower, why do central banks aim for, like, 2%? Why not 0?
That's partly why. If they aimed for 0 official inflation, the true rate might actually be negative deflation, which they really want to avoid. That 2% target gives them a buffer.
Got it. So why does it often feel higher to me, the perceived inflation?
Perception is tricky. We tend to notice price increases much more than price decreases or stable prices. Negative experiences stick out.
Confirmation bias, maybe?
A bit, yeah. Also, we focus on things we buy frequently. Groceries, gas. Price hikes there are really visible. We might not notice that the price of, say, TVs has actually fallen over time.
Well, good point. My TV isn't on my weekly shopping list.
Exactly. And again, your personal basket might genuinely be inflating faster than the average. Plus, cumulative inflation. A few percent each year doesn't sound like much, but over 5, 10, 20 years, it adds up significantly, eroding purchasing power in a way that feels substantial.
So it's a mix of real differences, psychology, and the limits of measurement.
That sums it up pretty well.
Okay, so after figuring out how complex just measuring it is, let's talk causes. We've gone from ancient debasement to modern stats.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's no single simple cause everyone agrees on.
Well, there's broad agreement on the main forces, but the emphasis and the interaction, that's where the debates have been, and they go way back.
Like centuries back.
Oh, yeah. Even before modern economics, there were competing ideas. Broadly, you had the quantity theory of money, QTM, versus something called the real bills doctrine, RBD.
Quantity theory. That sounds like what we discussed with Rome and the Spanish gold. More money means higher prices.
Basically, yes. It was formalized much later by economists like Irving Fisher with that famous equation, MVPQ. Money supply times velocity equals price level times output. The core idea: changes in the money supply are the main driver of price levels, assuming velocity and output are relatively stable.
Okay, and the real bills doctrine, what was that?
That idea, championed by people like Adam Smith, argued that banks should only issue money, like loans or banknotes, if it's backed by real short-term assets, like goods being shipped that will soon be sold.
So the money supply would automatically match the level of real economic activity.
That was the theory, ensuring money holds its value because it's tied to real stuff moving through the economy. These two ideas were debated fiercely, especially in 19th century Britain, between different schools of thought on banking.
Then Keynes came along in the 20th century and shook things up.
Big time. John Maynard Keynes, especially writing during the Great Depression, focused on price stickiness. He argued wages and prices don't adjust instantly. They're sticky, slow to change.
Like, we don't get immediate pay cuts if demand drops.
Exactly. So he said inflation, or deflation, responds more gradually to changes in aggregate demand, total spending in the economy, influenced by investment, confidence, government actions, interest rates.
And this led to the Phillips curve.
Sort of. A.W. Phillips later found this statistical relationship seemingly showing a trade-off. Lower unemployment seemed correlated with higher inflation. It fit the Keynesian framework well in the 1960s. Policymakers thought they could choose a point on the curve.
But then the 1970s happened. Stagflation,
Yeah.
high inflation and high unemployment. That blew up the simple Phillips curve, right?
It really did. And that opened the door wide for Milton Friedman and the monetarists.
Friedman's famous line.
Inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. He brought the quantity theory back with a vengeance, argued that the growth rate of the money supply was the key determinant of inflation.
So forget fiscal policy. Focus on controlling money growth.
That was the core message. He also argued, along with Edmund Phelps, that the inflation-unemployment trade-off was only temporary. People would start expecting inflation, building it into wage demands, and you'd just end up with high inflation and the natural rate of unemployment.
Which led to NARU, the non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment.
Exactly. The idea that there's a sort of equilibrium unemployment rate. Try to push unemployment below it with demand stimulus, and you just get accelerating inflation. Let unemployment rise above it, and inflation tends to slow down.
Then another layer got added, rational expectations.
Right. Economists like Lucas, Sargent, Barrow, they argued people aren't stupid. They use available information to form expectations about the future, including inflation.
So if people expect the central bank to let inflation run high,
they'll act accordingly, demanding higher wages, setting higher prices, and causing the high inflation they expected. It makes central bank credibility absolutely critical. A tough reputation can anchor expectations low. A soft one lets them drift up.
Okay, so we had Keynesians, monetarists, rational expectations. Where did things land? What's the view now?
There's been a convergence, often called the new Keynesian model or the new neoclassical synthesis. It emerged in the 80s and 90s.
What does it combine?
It accepts the importance of monetary policy, rational expectations, and a natural rate of unemployment from the monetaristrational expectations side. But it also incorporates Keynesian ideas like sticky prices and wages and other market imperfections.
So blend.
Pretty much. The dominant framework today is often called the triangle model of inflation.
Triangle, what are the three corners?
It says inflation results from a combination of three things. 1, demand shocks or demand pull inflation. 2, supply shocks or cost push inflation. And 3, inflation expectations.
Okay, break those down quickly.
Demand pull. Too much spending chasing too few goods. Think government stimulus, consumer booms. Cost push. A drop in supply making things more expensive to produce. Think oil price spikes, crop failures, supply chain disruptions, expectations. What people think inflation will be in the future, influencing wages and prices now.
That sounds like it fits the recent 2021-2022 inflation spike really well.
Exactly. Most economists see that as a mix. Huge demand shocks from post-COVID reopening and massive government support, plus major supply shocks from pandemic bottlenecks and then the energy price surge after Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
And expectations. Did they get out of control?
That was the big fear. But generally, while short-term expectations rose, longer-term ones seemed to stay relatively anchored in most developed economies, which helped prevent a full-blown 1970s-style wage price spiral. Central banks acting decisively also helped.
During that period, I also heard the term seller's inflation, or talk about corporate profits. Where does that fit?
That's a variation on the cost push idea, or maybe a separate factor. The argument is that in some sectors with limited competition, powerful firms used the cover of general disruption to raise prices more than their costs increased, boosting profit margins.
So market power playing a role.
That's the claim. Think of accusations against oil companies, for example, being slow to lower gas prices when crude oil costs fell. There was also a big debate about the M2 money supply growth after COVID.
Did that cause the inflation, like Friedman would have said?
Some economists argued yes, pointing to the strong correlation. But Fed chairs Powell, Bernanke, Greenspan before them have generally argued that the link between M2 and inflation became much weaker decades ago due to financial changes. They point to things like the declining velocity of money, how fast money changes hands. So the consensus is less clear on the direct M2 link than it used to be.
And looking ahead, are there new drivers emerging?
Definitely. Two big ones being discussed are persistent housing shortages in many countries, pushing up rents and house prices, which feeds into overall inflation, and climate change.
How does climate change affect inflation?
Through more frequent extreme weather events, hitting food production, raising crop prices, also increasing insurance costs for property, and potentially impacting energy prices and supply chains. These look like long-term structural pressures.
So it sounds like understanding inflation today means looking at money, demand, supply, expectations, market structure, and these new structural issues.
It's a complex picture, for sure. No single silver bullet explanation.
Which leads us to the effects. It feels like inflation has this split personality. We mostly hear the bad stuff, but you're saying there are upsides. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's not entirely black and white, especially when we talk about moderate inflation. But let's start with the general effect. Inflation reduces purchasing power. Your money buys less.
Right. Who wins and who loses?
Generally, people holding physical assets like property or stocks might see their nominal value rise with inflation. People holding cash or those on fixed nominal incomes, like some pensioners whose payments aren't indexed, lose out because their income buys less.
What about debt?
Borrowers with fixed-rate loans like a mortgage can actually benefit. The real value of the money they have to pay back decreases over time as inflation rises. Lenders lose out in that scenario.
Okay, so let's hit the negatives first. The pain points we all worry about.
Higher volatile inflation is definitely bad. It creates economic inefficiencies. Businesses find it hard to plan, budget, invest for the long term when they don't know what costs or prices will be. Resources get diverted from productive activities.
Uncertainty is killer.
Exactly. Uncertainty about future purchasing power discourages saving and investment. It can hit stock markets short-term too, as profits get squeezed, or central banks tighten policy.
And the hidden tax?
Right. If tax brackets aren't adjusted for inflation, bracket creep, rising nominal incomes can push people into higher tax rates, even if their real purchasing power hasn't increased. It's a redistribution effect.
Well,
It can lead to hoarding. If people expect prices to shoot up, they buy durable goods now, creating shortages. It can cause social unrest. High food inflation was a major factor in the Arab Spring uprisings.
and hyperinflation is just total chaos.
Complete breakdown. People stop using the currency. The economy grinds to a halt, leads to dollarization, using foreign currency. High inflation is also linked to corruption and erodes trust in institutions.
You mentioned other costs, shoe leather and menus.
Yeah, economists' jargon. Shoe leather cost refers to the wasted time and effort people expend trying to minimize holding cash when inflation is high, more trips to the bank, managing assets differently. Menu costs are the real cost businesses face when they have to keep changing their prices, reprinting menus, updating websites, and price tags. It's a drain on resources.
Okay, that's a pretty grim list. So what are these surprising upsides of moderate inflation?
Well, one key benefit is it helps with labor market adjustments. Wages are sticky downwards. Employers hate cutting nominal pay, and employees really hit it.
Understand?
But if you have, say, 2% inflation, a company can just freeze wages, and that's effectively a 2% cut in real wages in terms of purchasing power. It allows real wages to adjust downwards without disruptive nominal cuts, which can help reduce unemployment during downturns.
So it greases the wheels of the labor market.
That's the idea. It also gives room for central banks to maneuver. Imagine inflation is zero and the economy hits a recession. The central bank wants to cut interest rates to stimulate borrowing, but rates can't go below zero or only slightly.
The zero lower bound or liquidity trap.
Right, but if you have 2% inflation, the central bank can cut the nominal interest rate perhaps down to zero, which means the real interest rate, nominal rate minus inflation, becomes negative 2%. That provides a real stimulus. Moderate inflation keeps nominal rates away from zero most of the time.
Okay, that makes sense.
Any others?
There's the Mundell-Tobin effect. They argued moderate inflation encourages people to lend or invest their money rather than just holding cash, which is losing value. This could potentially lower real interest rates and boost capital investment and growth. So it discourages cash hoarding.
Yes. And maybe most importantly, moderate inflation helps avoid the dangers of deflation. Expected falling prices can cause people to postpone spending. It'll be cheaper next month. Businesses postpone investment. Debt burdens increase in real terms. It can lead to a nasty downward spiral.
So a little bit of inflation is like insurance against deflation.
In a way, yes. It keeps the financial system lubricated and avoids that deflationary trap.
We mentioned people on fixed incomes. Are there ways to protect them?
Yes, absolutely. Cost of living allowances or COLAs. Many pensions, government benefits, and sometimes wage contracts are indexed to inflation, often using the CPI.
So their payments go up automatically with prices.
Generally, yes. It aims to maintain their real purchasing power. Of course, CLAs mitigate the effects. They don't control inflation itself.
Right, so controlling inflation, that's the big job, mainly for central banks.
Primarily, yes. Monetary policy, enacted by central banks, is the main tool used today to keep inflation low and stable. Fiscal policy, government spending and tax, can play a role, but monetary policy is seen as more agile for inflation control.
How has the approach to controlling it changed over time? We touched on this, but let's recap the strategies.
Historically, the gold standard was dominant before World War I. Currencies were convertible to gold at a fixed rate. This anchored prices somewhat, but it was rigid, caused volatility, and was abandoned.
Then Bretton Woods after WWII.
Yes, tying currencies to the US dollar, which was tied to gold. That lasted until the early 1970s. Then, influenced by the monetarists, some central banks tried money supply targets in the 70s and 80s.
Aiming for steady money growth. Did that work?
Not really. The relationship between specific money measures, like M2 and inflation, proved unstable and unpredictable, partly due to financial innovation. So targeting money supply directly was mostly abandoned.
Which brings us to the modern approach.
Inflation targeting, pioneered by New Zealand in 1990. Central banks announce an explicit inflation target, usually around 2% for developed countries, and then use their main tool, usually adjusting short-term interest rates, to steer actual inflation towards that target.
And this is what most major central banks do now. The Fed, ECB, Bank of England.
Yes, that's the dominant framework. It's generally seen as having been successful in anchoring inflation expectations and achieving greater price stability compared to earlier regimes, though it's being tested now, of course.
Are there any other control methods still used or proposed?
Well, fixed exchange rates are still used by some, especially smaller or developing economies. They peg their currency to a major one, like the dollar or euro.
What's the trade-off there?
It imports the monetary policy and inflation rate of the country you're pegged to. You gain stability, maybe credibility, but you lose control over your own monetary policy to deal with domestic shocks. Denmark is an example, pegged to the euro.
Any really unusual ideas?
There's that heterodox idea of demurrage currency money that automatically loses value over time, like a negative interest rate on cash. The theory is it would eliminate hoarding, maybe even interest rates, and make controlling inflation easier. But it's never really been implemented on a large scale.
And what about just telling companies and workers not to raise prices or wages?
Yeah.
Direct controls.
Wage and price controls, or incomes policies. They've been tried, often in wartime or during high inflation periods like the 70s. They can sometimes help break an inflation spiral quickly and reduce the unemployment cost of disinflation. But economists generally hate them. They cause massive distortions, shortages, black markets, and misallocation of resources. Think Nixon's controls in the early 70s, widely seen as a failure. They don't address the underlying causes. Sometimes they've worked temporarily as part of a broader package, like in Australia or the Netherlands decades ago, but they're usually seen as a last resort, not a sustainable solution.
Okay, so we've really taken a journey here, from ancient coins losing their silver, to gold flows changing empires, through clashing economic theories.
To the complex ways we try to measure it today, grappling with quality changes and substitution.
Exploring its dark side, the uncertainty, the instability, the social unrest, but also those surprising potential benefits of moderate inflation.
And finally, the evolution of how policymakers, especially central banks, try to tame this beast, moving from goal to targets.
It really drives home that inflation isn't just some abstract number on a news report. It's this dynamic force shaping history, influencing politics, and, yeah, directly impacting daily life.
Absolutely. For you, the listener, it affects your savings, your wages, your borrowing costs, your future plans. It's deeply personal, even though the causes are global and complex.
And looking forward with these new potential drivers we talked about, housing shortages, climate change impacts, it makes you wonder, right, how will our understanding of inflation and our ways of controlling it need to evolve again in the coming years and decades?
That's the big question. How do we manage price stability in a world facing such significant structural shifts?
Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we really try to break down complex topics using key sources so you can get up to speed quickly. Today we're diving into something you've probably heard mentioned maybe on the news, maybe elsewhere, rules of engagement. But, what does that actually mean? Beyond the phrase itself, these invisible rules that govern military action, they're incredibly important. So we've looked at a few sources, starting with a really helpful overview from Wikipedia, actually. And our mission today is basically to unpack what these rules are, why they exist, and, well, the kind of impact they have around the world. It touches on some really big things, doesn't it? International law, human rights, and the very real practical side of military operations.
Absolutely. And this is, it's such a crucial area to understand if you want to get a quick handle on how international law and, military orders connect, especially when it comes to using force. It can seem pretty complex, kind of murky from the outside looking in. Understanding these rules gives you a much clearer picture of the constraints, but also the permissions that military personnel operate under. It's definitely not black and white.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The core definition seems like the place to start, right? It sets the stage. Our source defines rules of engagement, or ROE, as the internal rules or directives afforded military forces that define the circumstances, conditions, degree, and manner in which the use of force or actions which might be construed as provocative may be applied. Wow. So it's not just shooting, it's the whole range, like even actions that just look aggressive.
Exactly. That provocative part is really key. It's not just about the final act of force, but everything leading up to it, the posture, the signaling. And what's really fascinating, I think, is this dual purpose ROE have. They authorize the use of force, yes, but just as importantly, they put limits on it. And limits on specific capabilities, too. Think about that tension. A soldier might be authorized to act, but the rules about, say, protecting civilians might mean they have to hold back. It's this constant calculation. The rules don't tell you how to achieve something militarily, but they're very clear on what kinds of actions are unacceptable. So think of them less like a step-by-step instruction manual and more like a framework, setting the boundaries.
That idea of authorization versus limits, yeah, that really hits home. The responsibility there is huge. And you touched on this, but the weight these rules carry, it actually differs quite a bit depending on the country. Our source says they can be just guidance in some places, but lawful command in others. What does that practically mean? Guidance versus command, how does that change things for a soldier on the ground?
That's a really critical distinction, yeah. It changes everything in terms of legal responsibility. If they're mere guidance, well, it's advisory, a recommendation. A commander might decide the situation warrants deviating, although they're still bound by international law, of course. But if it's a lawful command, that's an order. Plain and simple. Disobeying it, even if you thought it was the right tactical move, could lead to serious trouble. Disciplinary action, maybe even a court-martial. It shifts ROE from being a suggestion to being, well, mandatory. You can see how that affects everything from training right through to accountability.
Right, it really shows the different legal cultures, doesn't it? And to make this more concrete for you listening, there's this thing called the ROE card. Our sources mention it. It's literally a card, like an abbreviated description of the rules of engagement issued to all personnel. Basically, a pocket summary for a specific mission, often laminated so that you can check quickly. They give an example. Rules of engagement for operation provide relief, 1992. That was in Somalia. Can you imagine? You're there, it's chaotic, you need to make a split-second call. Is that person a threat or just scared? That little card becomes, well, incredibly important. It's trying to boil down all this complexity into something usable under pressure.
And that ROE card really drives home how these rules become operational, doesn't it? But it also hints at how varied these rules can be, which brings us to a really interesting point, especially regarding the U.S. See, while lots of countries use ROE for everything international missions, domestic situations, the U.S. makes a very specific distinction.
Right. So if U.S. forces are operating inside the U.S., maybe helping out after a hurricane or during civil unrest, they don't use the same ROE they'd use overseas. The sources say they use something called Rules for the Use of Force, or RUF. And it's not just a different name, is it? It reflects a whole different legal basis. From what we gathered, ROE usually fall under the law of armed conflict, right? Thinking about enemy combatants. Whereas RUF are closer to domestic law enforcement ideas, de-escalation, minimal force, protecting civilian rights. It's a fundamentally different approach.
Precisely. It's a deliberate separation, reflecting the idea that the military's role inside its own borders is different. Citizens aren't treated as potential enemies, but as people to protect, even when force becomes necessary. That conceptual split is significant. It tells you a lot about how a nation views the military's relationship with its own population compared to its role in international conflict.
Right.
It's more than just a technicality.
That is fascinating. Okay, so that clarifies the U.S. situation.
Yeah.
But looking globally again, you said many countries have their own ROE, but surprisingly quite a few don't. So what happens then? A country doesn't have its own detailed rules or wants to check its rules against, global standards. Where do they look?
Good question. There are basically two main international go-to manuals that act as benchmarks. First, there's the NATO ROE manual. Its designation is MC 362-1. It's very comprehensive, but access is restricted. It's just for NATO and Partnership for Peace countries. Then there's the second one, which is arguably more influential globally because it's open to everyone, the San Remo Rules of Engagement Handbook. You can actually find it online, free, on the website of the International Institute of Humanitarian Law, the IIHL.
And the San Remo Handbook, its origin is interesting too. It wasn't just some committee. The source says it was created for the IIHL by Commander Alan Cole, Major Philip Drew, Captain Rob McLaughlin, and Professor Dennis Mansager. So, real experts, military and legal folks, bringing their practical knowledge together. That gives it a lot of credibility, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. And its influence is huge. It's not just some academic paper sitting on a shelf. The proof is in the pudding, right? It's been translated from its English original into French, Chinese, Arabic, Spanish, Hungarian, Russian, Bosnian, and Thai, and several other languages. That level of translation shows it's being used as a genuine global model. We know, for example, that countries like the UK have used it as a basis when they develop their own national ROE systems. So it's become a real cornerstone document internationally.
Okay, so we have these global standards like the San Remo Handbook widely available, but having the rules written down is one thing. Making sure people actually understand them, apply them correctly, ethically, that comes down to training, doesn't it?
100%. You can't just hand someone a book of rules this complex. And the International Institute of Humanitarian Law in San Remo, Italy, the same IIHL that hosts the handbook, is a major center for this. They run an ROE training course at least once a year, typically in September. And get this, it's taught by some of the world's foremost authorities on ROE, the people who actually write and live these rules. And it attracts students from around the globe, military officers, government lawyers, policymakers, all coming together to learn this stuff. It's building a common understanding.
And it's not just that one course in Italy, right? The impact seems wider. The source mentions the San Remo drafting team also does training for the UN, for different military colleges, other organizations if they ask for it. So there's this real ongoing effort to spread this knowledge, to make sure leaders and personnel worldwide are on the same page, or at least working from the same playbook. It's about building that global capacity. So let's recap. We've gone from the definition of ROE, looked at how they work in practice with things like the ROE card. We touched on that specific U.S. distinction with the Rules for the Use of Force, RUF. Then explored the global standards, like the super influential San Remo Handbook. And finally, the crucial role of training in making sure these rules actually mean something on the ground. It's really clear these aren't just dusty legal documents. They shape actions in the most critical, high-stakes moments imaginable.
Right. And as we finish up, maybe something for you, the listener, to think about is how these specific rules of engagement connect to the bigger picture. How do they fit into the wider law of war? Or even specific codes like the IDF Code of Ethics that our sources mentioned briefly? Does understanding the details, ROE, the authorization, the limits, the careful wording, change how you view the complexities, the moral and legal tightropes involved in conflict? And maybe, what does it suggest about how these rules have to keep changing, keep adapting as warfare itself evolves? Something to definitely mull over.